The Sustainable Development Solutions Network South Africa, or SDSN, exists to mobilize and support efforts towards accelerated achievement of the country's National Development Plan, the African Union Agenda 2063, and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. Driven by a vision of a planet where communities, economies, and ecosystems relate sustainably, respectfully, and creatively to produce innovative possibilities accessible to all, we mobilize South African scientific and technological expertise for policy analysis and advice to government, to create innovative solutions to developmental challenges, and to promote education for sustainable development. The SDSN is a global network of knowledge institutions that works closely with the UN to localize the SDGs and develop solutions to complex contextual problems such as climate change, inequality, and education. Practically, this global network operates through regional and national networks where local knowledge institutions such as universities and research institutes collaborate to increase and accelerate impact. The SDSN South Africa's Secretariat is hosted by the Albert Luthuli Leadership Institute at the University of Pretoria, where we drive partnership, collaboration, and innovation across sectors. SDSN South Africa supports and engages in projects and programs and hosts events and initiatives to promote sustainable development solutions in South Africa and worldwide. We galvanize research, education, and action on sustainable development and raise awareness about the SDGs. SDSN South Africa enhances collaboration between and representation of all its member institutions, building partnership through harnessing the strengths of each organization. Please visit the SDSN South Africa website as indicated on the screen below and follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube to keep in the loop of our many activities.
Welcome everyone to this amazing conversation that's going to be taking place today. This is called Africa Month Dialogue, and this is the first of its kind being hosted and facilitated rather by SDSN South Africa. So right here at the Africa Month Dialogues, we aim to have annual dialogues that allow African voices and stories to be heard when it comes to sustainable development. So this is something we're doing for the first time, but we hope to be able to have one of these every single year. My name is Alma Akab, and I head up the marketing and communications at SDSN South Africa, and I am joined with an incredible panel as well today, and I would love to introduce them one by one. So first up, we've got Dr. Faustin, who is the Senior Manager of SDSN Networks, and he is let me say that rather again. That's Dr. Faustin, right, who is the Senior Manager of the United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions Network, and he organized a University Presidents Meeting for Africa, which was attended by more than 200 presidents of the biggest universities in Africa, 5 ministers of education from the continent, and the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, Amina Mohammed, to discuss the contribution of the education sector in the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. And we're going to hear a little bit more about education, which is one of our sub-themes in this conversation. Also joining Dr. Faustin, we have Mr. Femi Oyeniyi, who is from SDSN Nigeria. Now, Femi is rounding off his doctoral research at the Department of Animal Science, University of Ibadan. He also lectures at the Department of Agricultural Technology, Ekiti State Polytechnic, and coordinates secretarial duties at SDSN Nigeria. Among other things, he supervises the focal persons in the 40+ knowledge-producing member institutions. As a bioclimatologist, his research dwells in the realm of climate-smart, sustainable food production. And again, we're also going to speak about sustainable food productions in our conversation. Last but certainly not least, we have Dr. Yolande Steenkamp, who is the Network Manager of SDSN South Africa, a senior researcher also at the Albert Luthuli Leadership Institute at the University of Pretoria. Her approach to research is largely interdisciplinary and aimed at developing solving, or rather aimed at addressing contemporary challenges. In interdisciplinary projects on leadership, she contributes on questions of ethics, meaning, and value, as well as collaborations for sustainable development. With her PhD in theology, Yolande is fascinated by the deeper dynamics that drive human beings and spirituality as one of these. Now, as I said, we've got a really diverse panel here. We've got education playing in. We have, biotechnologists. I know I didn't even say that right, Femi, and you will correct me. But I know that you are, well versed in the fruit production sector. And then we've got Dr. Yolande Steenkamp, who has a technological background, but then also very well versed in research and academia, as well as institutions. Now, we have three themes for today's discussion, which are peace building through partnership, entrepreneurship, and lastly, digital inclusion and education. And I am looking forward to us having this conversation. Our first question is going to come right to you, Femi, right? The first question is, in which practical ways can peace be forged sustainably among warring tribes in Africa, where language barriers already pose a key challenge?
Thank you, Halmer, for the question. To answer that directly, I would say a reduction of inequalities, and this speaks to SDG 10. We know there are 17 SDGs, and the 10th one speaks to reduction of inequalities. And why that is important is because Africa is known as a very resource-rich continent. I think 40% of the mineral resources in the world is held by the continent of Africa. But it's also true that Africa has several tribes. Nigeria alone has over 250 ethnic tribes. And if you move across the countries in the continent, which in any case, Africa has the largest number of, at the last count, 55, you have several tribes. Okay, so what this means oftentimes is there's mutual suspicion among tribes over control of resources. Okay, what I think would be done is for government, civil society, and academia to come together and try to build trust among the societies by helping them to govern their resources. So I would say inclusive governance would help. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that answer, Femi. And I completely relate to that as well. I'm from Cameroon, and we also have a very diverse, cultural group of people with such a small population. And your answer of building trust, I think, is so important, because at the end of the day, we all have the same vision. We all have the same long-term goal. It's just a matter of being able to communicate to them in a way that benefits everyone, and benefits everyone equally as well. Dr. Yolande, I'd love to now come over to you and just speak about now African stories. Right, African stories is at the essence of our very being. It's what we grew up listening to. It's how we express ourselves. I mean, if you listen to any conversation, it's Africans talking, because we will never just have a short statement. There will always be a story that surrounds that statement. Could we capitalize on this passion for narrative as a way of advancing peace building? You are currently muted.
Great start. Thank you, Alva, and I'm so glad that you asked me that question. And the short answer is yes. I really think that storytelling has immense potential to aid peace building. If you think of the theme that we decided on for this conversation today, I think it was singing and dancing. Yes, singing and dancing, unlocking sustainable futures in Africa. Then all of that speaks to storytelling. And it's very important to unearth that cultural heritage as we build more peaceful and more sustainable futures. And some input from the SDSN Great Lakes region was that they refer to, and I hope I pronounced this correctly, arbre a palabre, which means that they solve their problems through stories and in a sustainable way. And let's begin by considering that our African stories and our love for storytelling reveals something of how we regard knowledge and how we transmit this knowledge as cultural heritage, often through stories. namely that we understand ourselves and our position in the world as relational. We exist as part of communities. We live in relation to the earth. We live in relation to our ancestors in some cases, or at least to our memories in other cases. And we experience knowledge itself, therefore, or at least one should say knowledge that's worthwhile, as knowledge that is relational, knowledge in the service of something greater, namely in the interest of this interrelatedness, whatever can foster this interrelatedness and harmony that we so value as Africans. And our stories reflect this in that they capture the deep essence of our what we value most deeply, and what we tell through characters that work out their lives in relation to one another. And because stories capture our imagination, they entice us to see the world differently than we would otherwise, to imagine the world differently. And in that way, stories reframe our whole world, our whole frame of reference. And this is definitely something that we should explore in African peace building and in greater intercultural understanding in Africa, as both you, Alma, and Femi refer to. And it is important that we use what we already have in our cultural, in the quiver of our cultural heritage, so to speak. And now I'm generalizing, I know, as if there's only one Africa and everyone on the continent is exactly the same, when actually there's so much diversity. But I think we can at least say that we already have in the quiver of our cultural heritage this love of artistic expression, the story, the dancing, the drumming, the rhythm, and that we should utilize this in building a future of peace and of sustainability and opportunity on our continent.
I definitely agree with you, Dr. Yolande. I mean, as you're talking, it really takes me back. And I remember hearing about the stories of how we would never let anything go to waste. So just the drums, as you mentioned, the djembe drums would be made out of the skins of, dried skins of animals. And you would learn about the entire process of how, even though this is dead, it still creates life through music. And then I think everyone can relate to this. There's always this big tree that you grow up seeing, and you get told that that was the same tree that your grandparents saw, and now your parents and you keep it growing. And it just speaks to this continuation and protection of life, that although we were not being told SDG number 3 says, protect the planet, we were being taught through stories that here is how to save nature and let it go through different generations. So I really do love that. Did you want to add something?
Yes, you're just reminding me of when I was a child, and there was this song. It's just a tiny little line in my mother tongue that I'm going to sing. Kinders moenie met die water borstel, die ou mense wil dit drink. Which means children, don't waste the water, the old people want to drink it. It's really these small examples of how we instill values of sustainability in our young ones and in our old ones and everyone in between.
And the way we can still remember it till today, even though we might not know all the SDGs off by heart. That is, exactly what we're talking about. Faustin, my next question is to you, and I want to speak about your expertise in education. What are the most important aspects of peace education?
Thank you very much, Alma, for your question. Actually, as we are having this kind of discussion, I want to discuss education in two perspectives. So when we talk about education, there is this formal education, which we undertake in the classrooms, but also there is mass education, which should be done to the population or the people around, definitely the globe. So as far as peace education is concerned, definitely I'll like to stick on the other side of the mass education to definitely emphasize on how important it is, mainly in promotion of peace and the prevention of the conflict. when we talk about peace education and the important aspects around it, for me, I understand that peace education collectively contributes to the development of individuals who are equipped with knowledge, skills, attitude, and values necessary to create a sustainable, peaceful society. So there is a number of things, and actually you asked the most important aspects, but the list won't be exhaustive, I'm telling you. However, I understand that conflict resolution and mediation can be a very important pillar when it comes to peace education, as it emphasizes teaching individuals and community about effective ways to manage conflict peacefully. Then the second one should be human rights and social justice, which I think that educating about human rights principles and fostering an understanding of social justice is crucial for building a peaceful society. And this, of course, includes imparting, enough skills for promoting equality, inclusivity, and respect of the dignity of the wealth of all individuals, irrespective of their different backgrounds. There is another thing, actually, whenever I think about peace education, I won't forget, which is the critical thinking and mass literacy. So peace education equips individuals with critical thinking skills and media literacy to discern biases, narratives, challenge stereotypes, and promote objective analysis. It aims to counter hate speech, misinformation, and propaganda that can contribute to the conflict. Definitely, the list, as I've said, can be long, but gender equality and women empowerment is another important aspect. As far as you know how much women suffers from the conflicts around the world than any other type of the gender. So recognizing the importance of gender equality in peace building, peace education emphasizes the empowerment of women and girls. And it highlights the role of women in peace processes, challenges, and promote equal participation and representation. So the last of my list, which I told you can be long, is the active citizenship and civic engagement, whereby people should understand that peace education encourages individuals to actively participate in their communities and engage in democratic processes, and it promotes civic responsibility, social activism, and peaceful method of expressing grievance and fostering a culture of active citizenship. And thank you very much for your question. I wish I could be having more time to explore more about this topic. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Faustin. I wish so as well, because that's such a big topic that you mentioned that could take us quite a while to unpack. But I mean, to summarize it and to summarize this topic of peace building, until we each recognize that we have an individual responsibility, no change will be made. And that comes as a result of education. There cannot be an assumption that everyone has access to the same bowl of knowledge, the same fountain of knowledge when it comes to sustainability, about the role that we play and what is required of us as citizens of the world at large. And so as we move on to our next theme, which is entrepreneurship and digital inclusion, there are I think there's about 3 or there's 4 of us in this call, but we're representing a greater African network. And so I'd love to mention some work that is being done at SDSN Uganda. I don't know why I've got US in mind, but SDSN Uganda. Now, through different research activities, they have engaged different actors on digital entrepreneurship following its rapid evolution during the COVID-19 crisis. A number of professionals, enterprises, and individuals are leveraging digital platforms, especially social media, to facilitate economic exchange. Whereas these in particular These and particularly specific to urban areas, several actors are trailing digital entrepreneurship and capacity development hubs in low-income settings and rural communities. Most of the targeted beneficiaries are youth, women, and small, micro, and medium enterprises, and several youth startups are also taking shape in urban areas with the aim at service provision in transport, food delivery, and research sectors. My question is coming to you, Femi, but as I round off, so from an educational perspective, a number of SDSN Uganda member institutions are embracing digital technology and adopting this research, teaching, outreach, and community engagement mandate. What are the low-hanging fruits that can be used to achieve significant milestones in delivering the key infrastructures needed for digital connection in rural communities?
Thank you very much, Helma. This question is very important and is of special interest to me, and the reason is simple. So in Africa, there, on a continental basis, on a global basis, Africa has the youngest population, all right? However, we find as a challenge is that Africa has the lowest level of urbanization. So it means that Africans still live, or more Africans live in rural communities than those in urban communities. And that speaks to our the last question we addressed that has to do with inequalities. So oftentimes people who live in rural communities are cut off from public infrastructures and other facilities that will aid make their life more meaningful and help them achieve their long-lasting goals. Okay, so what I think we need to do is to look at the triple helix model. The triple helix model speaks to partnerships between the government, between the industry, and between the academia. And this should not just be rhetoric. It shouldn't just be all talk. It should be carefully planned for and through a bottom-up approach. So what that means is when this planning is going on, youth should be involved, women should be involved, traditional rulers should be involved, because these are those that are close to the grassroots. And what I mean by the grassroots are the base of the pyramid, the people in the low rungs of the society who appear to have been cut off from civilization. Okay, so by bringing all these various sections of the populace together, we can help to drive large infrastructure. For example, as I speak, it's more expensive for me to make a call within Africa than it is to make a call to the US, to the West, or to anywhere in Europe. So if I'm calling UK, it's cheaper to make a call than it is to call Rwanda, or than it is to call someone in Ghana, or in Uganda, or even in South Africa. And that's because of the infrastructure. So I would believe that when industry comes together, academia and then government, we will have some of those challenges fixed. And this speaks to SDG 17, Partnership for the Goals. Thank you once again.
Thank you so much for that answer, Femi. Again, reiterating the idea that without an interdisciplinary contribution, we won't be able to find a solution together. And when we speak about digital inclusion, we're speaking highly about access. A lot of the times we see, in Africa, young, bright minds who will be creating robots with the leftover items that they find in bins and different landfill sites. And you just think to yourself, if that access was there, I wonder what else they could do. And so that comes to my next question to you, Dr. Yolande, which is, how can African universities become hosts of initiatives that will provide entrepreneurial and digital literacy training at scale?
Thank you very much, Alma. It is true, indeed, that Africa finds itself in an era of rapid technological advancement and a growing digital economy, and therefore fostering entrepreneurship and digital literacy has become imperative for economic growth and development. And by leveraging their academic resources and industry partnerships and community engagement, African universities can empower the next generation of innovative and digitally savvy entrepreneurs thereby driving socioeconomic progress across the continent. Our colleagues in SDSN Ghana have shared a few wonderful initiatives through which they see African universities really stepping up as centers of knowledge and learning, and by which they can host initiatives that provide entrepreneurial and digital literacy training at scale. So I'm going to mention a few of these that they contributed. The first is to strengthen curricula and course offerings to include entrepreneurship-focused programs, majors, or concentrations that equip students with the necessary skills and knowledge to launch and manage their ventures successfully. And then secondly, establishing entrepreneurship centers and incubators. I think there's a number of universities on the continent that's doing this. I know the University of Pretoria here, where I am, has such an incubation center, several of them, in fact, in different locations. And that's extremely important to provide a nurturing environment for aspiring entrepreneurs, because we have to remember that the human learning process is by making mistakes and learning what not to do and thereby succeeding. So there has to be that nurturing environment in order to serve as a launch pad for entrepreneurs where they can safely make mistakes. These centers can offer a range of services, including mentorship programs, access to funding and investors, business development support, and networking opportunities. And this brings us to the next point, which is leveraging industry partnerships and networks, which both Femi and Faustin have also referred to. And this is to enhance the effectiveness of entrepreneurial and digital literacy initiatives. So collaborations with business, startups, and tech companies can provide students with real-world exposure and practical experiences. And this is something that really should be integrated in the curriculum already, so that by the time students come to the point where they develop their own business plan, they have already learned from the practical experiences of the business world that they were exposed to as part of their teaching learning experiences. And importantly here is establishing contact between champions of industry to allow for contact with students, inviting them as guest lecturers and mentors, and allowing these partnerships in a natural way to also lead to collaborative research between the academic institution and the business, and leading to internship, job placements, etc. And then engaging with local communities and startups to identify their need and provide targeted support. So by partnering with local entrepreneurs and startups, universities can facilitate knowledge sharing and promote collaboration, and maybe let us learn from mistakes that someone else made so that we don't have to make the same mistakes. And then an important one that Faustin also referred to is using technology to let our teaching and learning really just take flight. So embracing technology and online learning for scaling entrepreneurial and digital literacy training. For example, this is just one example of massive open online courses or MOOCs to reach a larger audience beyond campus boundaries. And these MOOCs are very expensive to develop. However, if universities in Africa put our resources together, we can create such programs that where we share the cost and then also share the benefits that we make available to all our learners from across the continent. And then finally, it is very important to engage with government for support and for policy advocacy. African universities should actively collaborate with governments to advocate for policies that support entrepreneurial and digital literacy initiatives. Some examples of what this might include would be advocating for funding opportunities, tax incentives for startups, simplified regulations, because it is so often very, very difficult for a young entrepreneur to jump through all the hoops involved in getting a business off the ground. And then finally, policies that encourage innovation and entrepreneurship. Thank you to SDSN Ghana for their contribution.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Yolande, and thank you again to SDSN Ghana. I really do hope that the right people are going to have access to this information, because those were practical examples that could be, implemented from the get-go and would really bear some fruit. So I hope that you are listening, and if you need any help, any assistance, please feel free to contact any of the various networks that are on the screen, and also those in your own country. If you need help finding them, let us know and we will be sure to connect you together. Now, we can't talk about technology, we can't talk about the digital world without talking about EdTech, right? So my question to you, Dr. Faustin, would be, what are some of the EdTech challenges in Africa, and how could we approach creating the solutions to these challenges? Because this is a solution-driven conversation.
Thank you very much again, Elma, for the question. I really appreciate it. And people should understand that actually EdTech, it's the only tool today to transform education, mainly in Africa. And people should also think about it critically, to the extent that if you need to minimize or eliminate the barriers of education, definitely the only tool to use now is education technology. I'll really appreciate the input from the Great Rex and the Uganda SDSN for their contribution mainly on this point. As I've said, we should understand that there is a potential of education technology to revolutionize learning and bridge education gaps, mainly in our continent. However, of course, you should understand that you are facing challenges which are hindering its widespread adoption and effective across the continent. And this, of course, require a critical focus to understand and derive or create a meaningful solution to overcome them if we need the education which might be contributing to the development of our continent. I have a number of points to mention, mainly in terms of challenges. We are facing the challenge of infrastructure and connectivity. That is number one, which push us to a limited access to reliable internet connectivity. We are lucky today we didn't really face any challenge of that kind. And inadequate technology infrastructure poses significant challenges for implementing education technology solutions. And to address this, as it is your question, government and stakeholders should prioritize investment in broadband infrastructure, particularly in rural areas, and initiatives such as public-private partnership, community network, and leveraging satellite and wireless technology that can help expand connectivity. Secondly, there is a serious issue of affordability, but also another one of accessibility. So there is a high cost of devices, high cost of software and digital resources, which hinders accessibility of education technology in many African countries. And actually, the example of COVID can tell you a lot, mainly to the education in Africa. And this could involve negotiating a bulk purchase agreement if you want to overcome this, and subsidize the devices, or facilitating access to affordable financing adoption for education institutions and families. Another thing which definitely I think I want to talk about is all about the teacher training and capacity building. As far as this is a new move, we really need to think about the trainers. They need the training so that they can have this positive mind shift. But again, as far as our continent and culture, I like what Yolande said. We really also need to localize and relevant. We need the localized and relevant content, because you can't take anything and bring it to a community. Definitely, first you need to be mindful about the culture and also actually the existing content so that what the new innovation can be contribute to the development. Another important point, which I think I need to mention, is all about mindset and cultural shift. You know, this is another task. Shifting mindset and embracing a culture of innovation in education is very, very important, mainly in education technology implementation. And this one involves creating an awareness among stakeholders, including teachers, including parents, who we are, and the policymakers about the potential benefits of technology and hence the learning. And at the end, we need to do a kind of advocacy campaign, policy dialogue, and showcasing successful case studies that helped the change mainly of the perception and foster a supportive environment for education technology adoption. Finally, and thank you to SDSN Uganda for the contribution. Education technology holds immense promise for transforming education in Africa, but of course, overcoming the challenges is the first point to work on to realize its full potential. And again, the issue of infrastructure, the issue of connectivity, and the issue of affordability definitely should be a priority. And again, work on the teacher training and the capacity building. At the end, that's what we need. If we really need this thing to minimize and, if possible, remove completely the inequality in education, we need to make a heavy investment in education technology. Thank you, Elma, for your question.
Thank you very much, as always, Dr. Faustin, for wrapping up that theme and telling us all the various facets that play a role in ensuring that we get to where we want to get to. Now, our final theme for today's conversation is education for a brighter future. Again, a big thank you goes out to SDSN Uganda for their contribution, as this is what they are doing. So, education, they say education continues to be a strong pillar for Africa's future, and SDSN Uganda Networks encourage decolonization of education through producing scholarly works that aim at theorizing everyday realities and practices in different communities, mainly in the field of urban development planning and management. Furthermore, locally contextualized experiences are being integrated into curricula, so as to build a citizenry that values and appreciates the heterogeneity of Africa and capabilities available to necessitate transformational change. I find that to be very interesting. And my question comes to you, Femi. How can education be made very attractive to communities that are culturally bibliophobic or bibliophobic? Yes.
Thank you, Helmer. So I would like to start by just shedding a little light on what bibliophilic means. So it means having an aversion for learning or for books in general, and that's not necessarily because they have an inherent hatred for knowledge or for education or for advancement. It's just that they are cut away or cut off from civilization. And we can see the underlying causes of these because oftentimes the people that fall into this category are pastoralists. They are itinerant in nature. They are nomads. So they live in places that are far away from the cities, the remotest parts of Africa. That's where you find them. So one of the things to do, which is very key to helping them to embrace education, will be to have a deep sense of respect for their culture. Okay, as someone said, you want to understand them first before you pass on to them what you have and that will benefit them. Okay, so that means having a deep sense of respect for their culture. And one of the things that is strong about their culture is they have a rich oral history. So the other time, Yolande spoke about song. Yes, so they have folklores, they make a lot of native songs. So by relating to them in this way, we could help to embrace their culture while at the same time passing on very good information to them. Okay, this is very key. It's also good to look at real life situations, hands-on activities, field trips, role playing, community-based projects that will make the education to be relevant, to be appealing, and to be tangible. It would also mean that we'll use visual and multimedia resources that would help to convey information and knowledge. Generally speaking, it's helpful that community participation and collaboration should be done for people who appear to be culturally bibliophobic. And the final thing I would like to say, actually, there's a cocktail of solutions. But one final thing I would want to say is it's important to make known to them or make visible to them rather the immediate benefits of education, of embracing education. So, for example, improved healthcare, higher earning status, letting them see how they can benefit from this would help to improve the likelihood of embracing education. Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much, Femi, for those insights. And I completely agree with you. I mean, I think back to high school and learning things in biology and learning about the plant system and the different diagrams. And yes, it all looks good in textbook, but the real impact comes when you have to plant your first bean seed and you get to learn about what it means to dehydrate a plant, what it means to overwater a plant, what it means to have too much sunlight, too little sunlight. And all of those things can be described scientifically, but it's only when you do it yourself and you do it physically that you get to learn those real insights. So thank you so much for that key contribution. Dr. Yolande, coming right back to you now. Uganda speaks about their process of decolonizing education. Is there room for decolonizing education in Africa to unlock this natural human love of learning?
Thank you, Alma. And I think I can really only start where Femi left off because he said very valuable things. And I'm going to start by focusing on the second part of your question, the natural love of learning. We are, as human beings, naturally attracted through our gift of curiosity to making new connections, recognizing new patterns. This is not something we have to create in people. This is something that naturally exists, that we can encourage through various things, including nutrition, very important. But what I want to focus on today really is the relational aspect. So much of our learning takes place by doing, engaging the tactile experience of touching something, tasting something, involving our body in a learning experience. And then secondly, the relational aspect of having elders that we learn from, and having even a larger community of all the children that we can ask, how do we do this? How does this work? You know, that question that 2-year-olds are so well known for, why? And this is how we naturally learn. So coming to the first part of the question about the post-colonial drive that so many of us strive for and strive for creative ways of implementing this, I think it really has to do with this heritage of colonialism, unfortunately, that at some point for Africa meant that what we valued as knowledge, when we enter the classroom, there is an entirely different kind of knowledge, a knowledge that exists out there that I must obtain and that looks in a certain way. I have certain qualifications, which means I now know these certain things that are outside of me, that there's not a relation to. And the subtle message, unfortunately, that I think we learned from that was all the other knowledge, the indigenous knowledge systems, the relational knowledge that existed in our families and in our larger communities, our relation to the earth, that is a less valuable kind of knowledge. And for me, that is the heart of the post-colonial search, really, is to relearn to value knowledge as something that is relational. So I come full circle in returning to what I said in the beginning, we are natural lovers of knowledge, but it is not a natural way to expect people to love knowledge that they have absolutely no relation to. And so I think creativity in the classroom means bringing relationship back. And then the second, I mean, there's so much to say on this topic, but I'll just say one more thing. And that touches on leadership, which, and Alma and I work at the Albert Luthuli Leadership Institute, so I have to say something on leadership. We have to teach our young ones to trust themselves as a source of knowledge as well. They embody experiences in their physical presence on earth, and they are carriers of cultural heritage that they inherit. And the reason for this is that it teaches agency. If I see myself as a keeper of knowledge, a producer of knowledge in collaboration with others, then I have agency for my life. If I get the message as a young child that I know nothing and the teacher knows everything, then for the rest of my life, the temptation will be there to look to a leader, some magical leader out there who will magically have the solution to all our problems. And that's what we really face in Africa. We think that by just getting another president of a country or electing a new premier for a province, it's going to solve all our problems. And it will not. It is about returning to this idea of a community creating the knowledge that we need to create our own solutions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Yolande. So insightful. And I mean, I can see all of us panelists and myself all nodding away as you were saying those final statements, because it is so true. And so my question to you, Dr. Faustin, would be, how can we use this education, be it formal education, be it cultural knowledge, be it knowledge that we have ourselves, how can we use this to bridge, or to be a bridge rather, to the implementation of SDGs in Africa? You are currently muted, sorry.
Thank you very much. Thank you again for the question. What definitely I would like to say is education has been a bridge for any innovation which has existed in this world. So to simply say that how education can be a bridge for the implementation of the SDGs, definitely it's a must. That is number one. But secondly, you should understand that education plays a key role in bridging the gap between the targets and the aspiration. Mainly, if you come to the Sustainable Development Goals, then this is as well a must, as I've said. I really appreciate as well the contribution from SDSN Uganda. I think we really need to do something about Uganda, given the fact that they have made a very good number of contribution. And from that, I'll say that education is a powerful tool for transformation and progress. And you know this one from any background, as I've said. However, I'd like to mention a number of few things in which education can serve as a bridge to implementation of the SDGs, mainly in our beautiful continent. If I can start from the number one, we should understand that there is a need of awareness and understanding of the SDGs. And this one can only be done through the education, because it's the only resource which raises awareness, mainly through educators and communities. And it helps also people understand the interconnectedness and of various social, economic, and environmental issues by mainly addressing the SDGs. But again, we should understand that there is a need of capacity building. This one I've talked about it. Whenever there is a change, there is also capacity building, mainly for the educators and trainers to understand how the new move is going to be operating. And another point I like mainly on this one is empowering the agent of change. We should understand that education empowers individuals to become agents of what? Of change, mainly in our community. It instills values such as empathy, social responsibility, ethical behavior, and then nurturing a sense of active citizenship. I like the point which Yolande said, by only seeing a new president or a new mayor or a new governor, this itself cannot solve the problem. You'll see that the solution of the problem comes within, either from the individual and mainly from the country, why not from Africa? So the solution for African problems should come from within, and from this we'll be able to implement the SDGs. So another thing, as far as education is concerned, and I can always mention that curriculum integration of the SDGs into our educational curricula ensures that sustainable development principles are mainstreamed across various subjects and levels of education. Therefore, by incorporating relevant themes, case studies, and practical projects related to the SDGs, education enablers and learners to grasp the significance of sustainable development in their own lives, in the community as well. It's another important mass. So as far as, again, education is concerned, they can't finish this one without talking about research and innovation. Education promotes research, and innovation in sustainable development. It encourages the generation of new knowledge, new methodologies, and new technologies that contribute to the achievement of the SDGs. Therefore, education institutions serve as a hub for research, innovation, and knowledge sharing, driving evidence-based policymaking and effective implementation strategies. So to conclude, leveraging the power of education offers a possibility for Africa to overcome the challenges hindering the attainment or achievement of the SDGs, since empowers individuals to become active contributors to the sustainable development, facilitates the dissemination of knowledge, and nurtures a mindset that embraces the principles of the sustainable development goals across Africa. So Elma, again, the discussion can be really hot and interesting, but I thank you very much for this initiative.
Thank you very much, Dr. Faustin. And we've reached the end of our conversation here, but before we go anywhere, I'd just love to hear final sentences from everyone. And before you say that sentence, to remind our viewers of the theme. As Dr. Yolande rightfully said, the theme for this discussion was singing and dancing, unlocking sustainable futures in Africa. And so my final question to you is a sustainable Africa possible? If so, how? Let's start with you, Femi.
It's interesting that the first set of questions are usually directed at me. Yeah, that's on the lighter mood. Okay, so yes, we can have a sustainable future in Nigeria. I'm sorry, in Africa. Okay, I'll start with Nigeria, of course. The charity begins at home. Yes. Okay. So, but then again, on a more serious note, how we can do this is by leveraging on SDG 17. Development in the true sense of the word can only come by interdependence. Okay, independence is good, but I think interdependence is even much more better. And you really can't be fulfilled if you're not interdependent on someone else, or interdependent, really, because there's no one that has the monopoly of knowledge, of resources, of talents, of skills, of good attitudes, and what have you. So there's a need for collaboration across the country, across the regions in Africa, North Africa, South Africa, Western Africa, Eastern Africa, Central Africa. There is a need for collaboration, and with that, long-standing and wide-ranging development. will be achieved.
Thank you so much, Femi. We always start with you because you start us off on such a high note. So let's head over to Dr. Yolande. If you could also, is a sustainable Africa possible? If so, how?
Thank you, Alma. I'd like to answer your question with an analogy. I love going to drumming circles, and a drumming circle is an interesting thing because it is about coming together. There's no one individual standing aside from the rest at a drumming circle. There is collaboration. However, there are individuals providing guidance. So you have some of the very experienced leading drummers having a specific call, and when they play that call, the majority of the drummers will follow, and the same when a certain round of drumming ends, there will be that call again, and everyone recognizes it, everyone is in tune, and that rhythm is just incredible. So is it possible to have a sustainable future on the African continent? It is certainly possible. Will it happen? I think that's the question we are really interested in. And I think if it is going to happen, it is because we are going to find a way very practically through real investments and real technological and other solutions to come together in this fashion, following the lead of those who are experienced, letting some weaknesses be addressed by some other individuals and regions and country strengths. And it is a real opportunity for us to learn and discover anew and really decide what makes us African and creating our own solutions. I'm positive about this because just this morning I was at a session on the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, and just looking at the expansion of the African continent's economy that becomes possible through an agreement such as this. I see real solutions to the unemployment that we face, to the lack of education that we face. There are real solutions here, but with the AFCFTA, or the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, being an example. I mean, how long have we been talking about this? But nations, countries haven't come together to actually make it happen. And therefore, in a way, we are standing in our own way and blocking our own progress. Is it possible? Yes. Will it happen? We should follow the rhythm.
Thank you so much, Dr. Yolande. Follow the rhythm indeed. Very much in line with our theme as well. And lastly, over to you, Faustin. Is a sustainable Africa possible? If so, how?
Thank you very much, Elma. I think I really need to reiterate what Yolande and Femi said throughout the discussion. By again coming back to the singing and dancing, I've never seen someone being forced to dance or to sing. It's something which comes voluntarily. Definitely you commit to it. So Africa continent can also commit to sustainable future. Why should we be talking about conflict when there is peace? Why should we be talking about hunger when there is a possibility of food security? Why should we be talking about poor or lack of education when there is quality education? So definitely, I do understand that this Africa as a continent should first commit to the sustainable Africa. As Yolande mentioned, the African Continental Free Trade Area has been a number of years while we are talking about it, expecting it to happen next year. But you see what is taking place, almost nothing. So I do understand that it's all in the hands of Africa before anyone else's hands. So Africa, if it commits to it, definitely it will be achieved. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for ending that off and giving us that visual picture as well. Like you rightfully said, no one is forced to sing and dance. In fact, it is enjoyable. And the same way when we think about sustainability in Africa, it should be something that is spoken about with joy, with laughter, with a group of people, and that it is enjoyable. Thank you so much to everyone who has tuned in today. I really do hope that you have learned a lot. I myself have learned a lot, and I hope that you leave today thinking about new ways of sharing knowledge, thinking about new ways of telling the African story, new ways of creating songs and poems. In fact, we would love to hear everything that you come up with. We would love to see if you come up with a poem that has to do with, saving the earth. If you come up with a song with a group of your friends that has to do with preserving water, we want to hear it. We want to read it. So please do send that to us, whether it is SDSN South Africa, SDSN Nigeria, whichever one, send it to us and we will share on our platforms. And we'll see how we can get these different sources of knowledge out to the greater community. Yes, Dr. Yolande.
Thank you, Alma. I was just thinking maybe someone else was also reminded of a childhood rhyme or a childhood song that they would also like to share with us. It would be wonderful to see all of these traditions come together.
Definitely. I think it would be great to see how my story would probably be echoed in Uganda, which would be echoed in Ethiopia. And I just think it'll be fantastic. So do share those with us. We look forward to seeing you next year. This is the first, but this will certainly not be the last. Thank you again and enjoy the rest of your day.